Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland, so thank you for coming back to my channel. This is about the death of Khaleda Zia, so the first woman to be Prime Minister of Bangladesh. She died just today at the age of 79. Well, what can I say? So she certainly has her admirers in Bangladesh, and she was chairwoman of the Bangladesh National Party for many years. So a very prominent figure in Bangladeshi politics, even when she wasn't actually prime minister. And wow, the things seem to be really on the up for a party, given that her nemesis, Sheikh Hasina, had just been driven from office last year by tumultuous demonstrations, just rocked the country, fled into exile in India, granted asylum there. Bangladesh has requested Sheikh Hasina's extradition. New Delhi has declined that. Sheikh Hasina put on trial for crimes against humanity, found guilty and sentenced to death. So Khaleda Zia seemed to have it going all her own way, and elections were coming up in a few weeks. And it looked like the Bangladesh National Party was going to sweep all before it. It's a curious irony that those initials BNP should also be of a political party in the United Kingdom which detests the Bangladeshi community, the British National Party, which is a white supremacist party. Anyway, so Miss Zia, she came to prominence partly because of relatives and women in South Asia who got to the top office. It's often been because of whom their male relatives are, as in Begum or Begum, how do I pronounce it? That's like this title, like lady. Khaleda Zia was married to Ziaur Rahman, who was leader of the party as well, and he was president of Bangladesh, assassinated in office. Goodness. So she came from a wealthy landowning family. She's Sunni Muslim, of course, born in West Bengal, what's now India, in the British period, so just before the partition of it, 1947. So she's a subject of the British Empire, and then she was a citizen of Pakistan as a former. Remember, Bangladesh was East Pakistan, and her husband was commissioned into the Pakistani army. There were not that many Pakistani army officers who were Bengalis. Despite Bengalis being about 52% of the population of Pakistan in those days, they were way less than that of the officers. And she was even briefly, he was posted to West Pakistan, what we'd now call Pakistan. So she got married at 15. And in 1960, even for a middle class Bangladeshi family, that was not unusual. Yeah, so her family had owned tea plantations and traded in tea and so on. So although she was married for 7 years before her first child was born, but her husband was one of those Bangladeshi officers, the Pakistani army, who mutinied, who joined the Mukhti Bahini, as in the independence fighters, and obviously their success were crowned with victory. They'd seen the heavy discrimination against the Bengali ethnic majority, the degradation of the Bengali language, and so on, the massacre of intellectuals, and wide-scale brutality by the Pakistani army. No army is perfect, particularly counterinsurgency. So counterinsurgency forces often behave badly, but the Pakistani army behaved egregiously badly. Not wishing to be anti-Pakistani or saying that they're all guilty, but a serious number was, and nothing was done about it by the top brass, and they considered women to be mere spoils of war. So rape was very, very widespread, and that was against fellow Muslims as well. Anyway, I'm not saying it'll be any better if it's done against Hindus, but so much for Muslim solidarity. But her side won, and as one of the relatively few guys who'd been in the army, but previously he got promoted very fast. Okay, after what's now called the Liberation War. Goodness. Okay, so then Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, he was leader for a while, but he was overthrown and assassinated, and then so her husband became president, but then he was shot dead in 1981. It's only then that she got involved in public life. Then she was in the Bangladesh National Party, which her husband had founded, and only in 1978, and eventually she became prime minister. Served two stints as prime minister. Obviously, she had to be elected to parliament to do that, and chair one of the party. So 1991 to 96, she was a prime minister, and again 2001 to 2006. But yeah, she was a dominant personality of the party for a very, very long time, and insisted that Islam was completely compatible with women's rights. But really did not speak up for Pakistan, sorry, for Bangladeshi feminists. She made an alliance with the Jamiat-e-Islami, who were often viciously anti-Hindu. The Hindu minority were often accused of blaspheming Islam and things like that. Their property was sometimes stolen. They sometimes suffered violent attacks, and the police were very tardy about dealing with them. So, yeah. So some people thought that she was bad news. Anyway, so she was eventually arrested and charged with all sorts of crimes and briefly imprisoned. And she accused Sheikh Hasina of misusing the judiciary for a political vendetta and stuff like that. So she was in prison for a brief while. Some elections she'd boycotted in the 80s, even 2014. She's let out of jail quite quickly, but spent the rest of her time in Bangladesh. She was acquitted of some of the cases against her, supposedly a misappropriation of funds intended for an orphanage. Okay, so it's unclear when she was actually born because she's given two different accounts of her marriage. Anyway, of her date of birth, especially like her marriage certificate. But she suffers from severe kidney problems. Now, her son, she had two sons. One died a few years ago. The other, Tariq Rahman, he was involved in politics. He was arrested, claimed he was tortured, was allowed to leave the country. In return for an undertaking, he would disengage from politics. But as soon as he fled to London, as soon as he got asylum in the United Kingdom, he reneged on that and he made some political statements and he flew back. Now, when her political enemy was driven out, she didn't come back in as prime minister immediately. Muhammad Yunus, seen as more of a neutral figure, somewhat a Nobel Prize winner for his Grameen Bank, this microcredit, even allowing beggars to get very small loans, are very, very helpful to the impecunious. Um, but Sheikh Zia, once she was sentenced to death. So Tariq Rahman, why didn't he come back much sooner? Maybe he still wasn't sure he was safe. Remember, his father's assassinated. There have been bids to assassinate his mother. There could be an attempt on his life and so on. And why did he come back now? I guess he found out that his mother was very close to the end. That'd be a bit of a sympathy vote. Will he be swept to office? It's quite possible he will become a prime minister like his mother before him, or president like his father before him. He's one of the few people in the world ever to have one parent as a president and the other as a prime minister. And will he get some a high office himself? We shall see. So a rather mixed record. I mean, I didn't think she was a good person. I know there was some economic development under her, but it certainly wasn't a very free country. And those who secularists who publicized their view, they got death threats. They sometimes got murdered and so on. I mean, there's still grinding poverty in Bangladesh. Some who have lifted out of it. She did a lot to spread literacy for women, to improve self-flood defenses, because they have terrible cyclones every few years, but they're not as destructive as it used to be. They're better shelters, often because of purda, or women wanted to keep away from men outside the family. There weren't proper women's sections that unwilling to go in, often died as a result. But she really did improve that. So I got to give her some credit. That is Khaleda Zia.